It's Monday, January 15th at 2 p.m. in the Susan Tully Livesley Boardroom of the 1887 building. It is now 2:06 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order.
All right, we'll note that Mr. Scarrow, Julia Ingersoll, and Adam Andre are all here as the policy committee members. The agenda, we'll go ahead and go to the instructional material selection and evaluation procedures. And we compiled and put together at the request of the board and out of a recognized need there to review and update our policy related to the instructional material selection, but in particular the portion which is related to the challenging of an instructional materials. And I think, as everybody's been aware, recently received a challenge of 444 books, I believe, between the middle school and the high school. I know Mr. Keel is still working through that process following the current policy and those procedures on that level 1 review. The middle school has wrapped that up, but once Mr. Keel's finalized, we'll share that those findings there. But as a result of that, it did create quite a disruption to the instructional environment in the sense that there was such a quantity of books that current policy requires them to be pulled from circulation until the principals act on that review. And a number of them were books that were on the AP reading list and or being used in a couple of them being used at the high school level in courses, and or a number of students who have them checked out just as part of their regular learning or their enjoyment of reading. So what we've done here, we put them in no particular order, just it's the way they were on the paper. The board is in the process of considering shifting to a company that does a lot of policy work. Most of the districts in the state follow Neola. This is an example of the Neola policy we have some recommended strikings if we were to look at that sort of format, just because they're referencing policies that we don't have. That is one of the challenges when you go to Neola. It will reference policies that you got to go through that process of, are we going to adopt that policy or not? Right. So again, they're in no particular ranked order, but option 1 kind of reflects that Neola model, what that looks like. This is more just so the board's aware of that. Some of the yellow is language that we recommend that we look at or scrutinize. I don't believe the Neola has the 30 years. The blue is language that we would recommend based off of our policy in that language. It kind of gives you that sense of what that looks like within that format if we were to include our language. Option 2 is our current board policy. We put the caveat with a couple recommended changes. Again, this is a very minimal recommended changes listed in option 2. Again, the significant disruption was the books being pulled out of circulation. I believe for the most part, right. Option 2, we're just showing just strike that portion of it. You could leave everything else pretty much the same if desired. And then option 3 is look, I know Mrs. Bosch and Mrs. Essman and myself looked at a lot of different examples around different districts within the state of Wisconsin, others around the world. There's been so many people who've been so willing to be helpful in sending their great examples to us. So we compiled some of those ideas and put those there for consideration. So, you know, as a policy committee, and I think Ed brought up a great point before the meeting. I just want to, if you want to go ahead and share that, it's kind of, you know, how do you want to attack this?
Yeah, well, I think the whole subject with respect to Neola is that fact that we're under this week budget crunch. You know, I don't know how we're going to justify to the public that we're going to spend $20,000 on developing new policy. You know, for me personally, the only reason I wanted to look at Neola was to help us keep ourselves out of court.
Sure.
You know, this day and age, it seems like people are, you know,
it's a litigious society.
Yes. Yeah. And I just think that we spend a lot of time, staff spends a lot of time, and then we spend a lot of time on looking at policies constantly on the site.
Right.
Well, it's like we're chasing our tails, and I
agree with you.
And I just think that it's not helping the district long term by not just making the decision to say, hey, you know, either we're gonna, you know, spend it in staff time and our own time,
Right,
or we can get on board and let,
right,
you know, because it's, in round numbers, it's 20,000 and it's like 5 annually, something like that. in
Yeah.
Round numbers, and so I just think that, you know, I really want us to bring that back to the.
Yeah,
the
so-
board and-
let's look at option 2, since that is our current policy.
Okay.
And then take some of the things that some of us kind of liked or didn't like from the other 2 options and see if we want to incorporate any of those things. Does that make sense? Just start with our policy and then go from there.
I think that's in the interim, that's the best.
Okay. I'm good with that. How about you, Adam?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, the first thing, of course, you know, they were restricted is the fact that we want these books to remain available until they're reviewed. I think that's the common thing that
Yeah.
everybody was upset with, so
Mhm.
that's a lot of amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, on this option 3, they put in like a fee for each
Mhm.
review that's required.
Mhm.
Can you share with me where that came from and where do you think the $50 came from?
Yeah, that was more looking at a similar structure to the open records request type fee. Absolutely don't have to do that or put that in there. I think one of the questions that came up is, well, how can someone, you know, go through a process and put in a request to review 444 or whatever. And there were a couple people that had responded in their communications, well, what would prevent me from doing an open records request for, you know, what are all the library books that you have in your library, and then just submit a challenge to all 10,000, whatever. Part of it can be the process that you set up, that you've got to fill out an individual documented form for each one, that you verify I've read and reviewed this, rather than just copy and paste from websites
Right.
and borrow from others. I'm gonna say the person who did the challenge had to spend a lot of time on it, because they did put in, you know, the rationale for each one. They completed a form, which wasn't a district form, but they borrowed a form from a different location, which, to be frank, has helped the process in reviewing that, because they went through that. But they clearly spent a lot of time and effort in putting that document together. So at a bare minimum, at least having a process in there that requires that time and or effort spent in challenging something. But that was why that was put in there, that it would potentially curtail or prevent frivolous type. You know, if you're going to put in a challenge of 10,000 books because you think it would be humorous, or you want to tie up time or whatever, then that's a lot of money you've got to put out in the debate. But there's no, again, that's just,
What
those are just food for thought.
I'm not against having a fee, but if there was, you know, maybe there's a limit to it, up to 5 books is free. Beyond that is,
Yeah, I can see a scenario like that where it would be a certain number of books that could be challenged for, you know.
But the thing about that is they can do multiple. You have to address
That's
that
true.
wording
You could
that-
have a group of people who each submit challenges up to that number. Yeah,
yeah, that's a good point.
That was where it kind of came from, was just in recognition of the amount of time that it takes for someone to go
I
through.
feel like
Yeah.
50 might be a little steep.
Yeah, 50 would be this. I mean, what was our total cost as a district with all the time that was put in this? Had to be tens of thousands of dollars, you know,
Would have
Days of
to,
work.
days
It's days of work.
on high
By
payments.
multiple,
salaries.
multiple, yeah.
I'm guessing
Yep.
50, and it probably comes, probably a little bit less than what hourly made up the principals are.
Yeah, that's a big dollar.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think a fee should be charged. But I think $50 isn't gonna cover a cost. Like that. now.
That's
But-
true for one,
but-
even
but-
for one, yeah.
But it's gotta be part of it. I mean, these books just don't end up in our library without somebody looking at them in the first place. So, you know, they are being reviewed before they get into our library, so. I would,
I don't know if
Well-
that's completely true, but
Yeah, and so I respectfully, I would challenge that, because one of the things, one of the things that I noticed in here was we can, when we accept gifts. When somebody donates books, say if somebody donates 100, whatever, it's a bunch of books, they're accepted and they don't, they aren't approved by anybody. There's a form, this 840 rule, there's a form that's supposed to be filled out that you're supposed to, somebody donated is supposed to give, fill out. But I don't know, I've never seen it, we just accept it because we love gifts, and I don't think anybody would ever say, no, I don't want that. But you can donate books and nobody sees it.
The librarians, they use different tools and so forth, but I would agree that in concept, they may not be familiar with every single book that comes in. They rely on
Right.
third-party sources and vetting groups that, hey, these are good books to have in your collection and so forth. And they review and go back, and librarians, whether it's the public library or school libraries, they'll read their collections and so forth from time to time or on an annual basis. But yeah, they're not, it's just the sheer volume of books, they don't have time.
But they're vetted somehow.
Yeah, they'll use third-party sources. Adam's right, though, in the sense that you may have donations that they should go, if it's a donation to the library, they're gonna go through that and check those. Classroom libraries and so forth, though, we rely on and trust our teachers to bring the books in. But I will tell you, as educators, I myself am one that I have a lot of outdated, not really relevant books on my own shelves in my office because there's such an aversion to getting rid of the books.
Sure.
Or when I have purged books from my own library, it's like, I hope nobody's seeing me throw these in the recycle bin. But so there's, if teachers rotate rooms, they're not going and throwing away all the books that are there, so they may not have a complete grasp of what's there, but we do trust and empower them to oversee that. And that's why I think it's important to have a challenge process in case something does come up so that it can be reviewed at that time.
Yeah, this is gonna take time, I think patience.
So I think if we went through this, if you identified what are the concepts that you'd like us to incorporate, then we can go back, craft language, we can bring it up to the next policy committee meeting and have a kind of a draft of, okay, not 3 options, but here's a draft to review and revise of one draft.
I think the number one is what Ed led this with is you can't take 400 books out of circulation.
Right.
Immediately. That's
Great.
I mean, I think that's just a hard way to start there and get
Yeah.
one on the table.
Right.
Let me ask, in our policy, a number of policies, this was a question that came up. Do we want anybody to be able to challenge? There's language adult citizen, or do you want it left to parents of students and or the direct consumers, I guess, those that have a stake in that?
So currently it's stated any adult citizen. I mean, are we adding in of an EASD student? Or is
It's
that
just the current
currently-
language just says may be filed by any adult citizen and or parent guardian of an open enrolled student of the district. So
Oh,
we're recommending just change it to of an
To-
ESD student.
got
Doesn't
it.
matter whether they're
Yeah.
open enrolled or
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
so the person has to either be a parent or a guardian of a student at the school.
We just wanted, right now, it could be anybody in an adult citizen or a parent and or a parent.
Or could-
You
so
want
it
to
could be
remain that it could be just
Okay,
any citizen can challenge, or do you want it to be limited to parents and guardians? I guess that was the question.
Well, they need to live in the school.
That
Yeah.
would be,
yeah, I mean,
I mean, that's how
They're
I'm
paying-
adult citizen.
so we should probably clarify adult citizen of the school district.
yes, yes, I
Make it very
agree.
clear that you gotta
Yeah.
be within our district to
Right.
challenge something in our district.
Yeah.
All right, this would have the language stricken from pulling it out. The appeal level then would still be the same. The principal would look at it and make that determination of continued use, discontinued use, or restricted use of the materials involved. Now, there was some example down below that do we want the principal to have that discretion to recommend discontinued use, or do you leave that for a higher level appeal? Do you limit their decision to continued use or restricted use?
I think it should be left, the discontinued use should be left at the principal level because I think I personally feel like it should, the discontinued use should be left at the principal level and not delayed, because if that's the person's ultimate intent is to have discontinued use, then they have to appeal it to a higher, you know what I mean?
If the principal turns it down.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I'd still like the principal to have that discretion,
Okay.
but what do you guys do?
Yeah. I would put other principles.
Yeah.
If they want to appeal that decision, currently they would appeal to the district administrator, library media specialist of that assigned grade level, then the director of instruction that's related to that grade level, and that's, we review it, make a decision similar to the principal with the same potential outcomes. After that, the current policy then gets appealed to the school board in writing. One of the suggestions we put down below, and again, this is nothing against the school board, it's just where do you want it to go? Another option, which we have seen other districts do, now that we have a curriculum council, some other districts will steer that to that non-board, or that, there's board members on that council, but that's another option. We put that sample language down there. If the school board decide, well, we don't want to deal with that decision as a board as a whole, that you could empower the curriculum council to be that ultimate appeals board.
I have a strong opinion on that.
As the ultimate, so
You could do it either way. You could do another layer, or you could do it as the ultimate layer. What we've seen on the other examples, I would leave it as is, unless you're going to appeal that, or unless you're going to empower that curriculum council to make the final decision.
No,
If not, then I would leave it as is.
I would leave it as.
Because I think that gets to too many appeal
Agreed.
levels, yeah,
And,
and a lot of time.
and the curriculum council, other than 2 members, is not elected.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't feel like the curriculum council is to look at curriculum. Yes, there are some books that are in the library, of course, that are part of curriculum,
Mhm.
but on a whole, that's not the curriculum council's responsibility. It's curriculum, not the entirety of the library.
Yep.
Okay.
That's fine, we would leave that as is then, the only reason we share that, we've seen that's kind of a movement as more of these have popped up, the boards have shifted that. This board would like to maintain that as that final.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
Then were there other concepts that you'd like to see incorporated into like a proposed draft revision from either option A or, I'm sorry, what?
The other thing is the amount of times that you can review materials.
Yeah.
That we should.
Oh, yeah,
Yes. That is.
you mean having a time limit? That was something else we saw, most policies have a time limit.
Mhm.
I'll be the person, I kind of put down I recommended a 30-year, because that's kind of reflective of a generational time. Sarah chuckles, but most are 10.
Actually, they're 5, but.
Oh, 5? All right.
I,
All right, well, what really changes in 5 years if the book's the same?
I thought 30 years was a little long.
I have 30 circled in big red. I couldn't lie.
Well, I tried, I'm not gonna be around.
Really long term.
Yeah, it's a really long time.
Yeah, I would leave
5.
I was leaning toward 10.
I
Is
mean, the
that kind of
book
what you were
stays
thinking,
the same.
Sarah?
Um,
Or,
Yeah, I
the
mean, I
best
agree with that.
practices we saw were 4 to 5.
4
But
to
if
5.
you're thinking 10,
Okay.
that's okay too.
I mean, somewhere between
5 and 10 would be okay with me. 30s, and I get your point. Your point is 100% valid. But lots changed in 2 years.
Yeah, if you
Lots
think
changed.
about how much has changed in the last 4 years.
I know, To Kill a Mockingbird used to be a classic and read it in high school when I was in school.
Right.
Now it's one of the more banned books out there. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I think our world changes a lot faster than
Right.
30 years, so.
So did we want 5 or 10?
I'd be
or what
okay
did we
with
want?
5. What
I'm good with 5.
good with 5?
All right.
Sarah, which?
Don't say it like that. I'm adding it in G.
All right, other concepts that were in there, you did want us to put in a fee schedule?
Yeah, I just
That's
don't,
gonna be tricky.
I just don't know, I'm not like 100% on where that should land.
Were there other examples of that anywhere that somebody?
Yeah,
I would say a fee is not common.
No,
okay,
What if we looked at, our open records language that we have about tallying, the amount of hours that it takes to review it? Is that maybe a good starting point, perhaps?
That'll be more than $50.
Probably.
yeah. I just don't want to throw an arbitrary number up. and
Right,
Say it's
right, right.
$20 a book. I can't justify saying, well, this is, if we can justify $20 and say, this is why we chose $20 a book, okay. But $50, that's just not.
I don't think we can, nobody, if we put in the cost of what it really is gonna take,
$1,000.
they'll be really upset.
Yeah,
Because it's probably gonna be, you know, if we look at our principal's hourly wage, they're probably gonna spend an hour dealing with this.
Mhm.
All set, so, look. Approximately, what is that?
$80, I don't know.
Are we just talking hourly or are we talking the
Yeah,
entire
yeah,
package?
like,
Yeah, their entire package, I mean, they're, you know, they're taking it out of their normal day to do this task, so. If they spend an hour on it, which I think they'll easily do.
About $80 an hour.
I was just
for
gonna,
a
that's
small
what the number I said, it was 80.
package.
So,
Yep.
50 is cheap.
so yeah, 50 is cheap, and so, I mean, justifying it, to me, that's an unreasonable. You know, fee to pay to have something done. Because I'm concerned about it, okay, we're concerned about your concerns, but you gotta help us along a little bit. On covering our costs down,
What if,
so.
what if we did
no,
like
you're
2 books? Because, I mean,
Buy
think-
one, get one free.
well, I'm thinking, okay, let's take the scenario that we have in front of us, we had 444 books challenged. If that would have taken 222 people to submit that many challenge, you know what I mean? Like, it would be much more difficult to challenge a significant amount of books if you're doing 2 at a time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wonder if I don't want it to be prohibited if someone has a concern, but at the same time, I think it's reflecting the time and effort of the individuals and not. It's alleviating the concern of the wasting the employees' time, and that's a common theme and thread. We heard feedback from the community is that this is not good use of their time, that concern over that. And so if there is a recompense for that, my concern is, well, if I don't get charged per individual request, I think we also would need to have language within a X time frame.
Sure.
Because otherwise, well, I'll just submit one this week, then it's free. I'll
Well,
submit one
that's-
next week.
that's
it's
just
free.
it,
One
is-
Following week, it's free.
Right, and I think we could maybe write some language in like
We
that.
put some language within a X period. There is no charge for, yeah, and then.
Right. Because what I don't wanna have happen is somebody who is economically disadvantaged have a concern and not be able to afford to make.
I do like the language that is included in regards to the informal. Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
language I'd like to incorporate that, was that an option 3?
The number.
Yep.
that talked about that when you have a concern, bring that up. You don't have
Yeah.
to do, it, follow that informal process.
Yeah,
Let the principal, the librarian, basically it's gives them an opportunity to review it. And say, if they say, yeah, no, I think we think it's okay.
mhm,
There's no charge for that. No, that's just a legitimate concern bringing forward. It's then when you want to formalize that.
right,
So there is a process, and if we incorporated that language, and we'd prefer that to be the case anyway. If anyone has a concern or a question over, learning or materials to communicate and have that advocacy there.
Yeah, I like the way that 3 read too. Overall.
Which section was that in?
It's at the top.
It's-
under
it's at the top,
consideration.
Oh,
under
at the top,
informal
okay.
too, yeah,
Number 2.
Two.
Keep
Yeah.
scrolling. Keep going. There you go.
yeah.
Nope, right there. Library
Just
materials.
a little bit more.
Okay,
There you go.
right there.
There you go.
Okay. So if you like that informal complaint procedure, because we could add that in. And I think that could alleviate a lot of that. Secondary concern if there is a charge in recognition of the time and effort.
I think that addresses the concern.
Yeah.
Again, well, I guess if there is a concern about multiple items, separate form must be completed for each item. Yeah, again, I just would hate to have even the librarian's time consumed by, does that give enough restriction? The way it's worded, could somebody potentially come with a large amount of
Informal
requests,
complaint.
and then that's tying up the librarian. Or principal, either one.
How many of the 400 or whatever, how many do you think were moved at all in any way?
Well, Dan's not done with his,
Just, okay, of the ones that were done, what do you, I mean,
you mean at
A
the middle
couple.
school level?
maybe how many were moved from middle school to high school?
No, I think it was around 20 that Ryan recommended move to the high
That's the
school
number
level.
that came to my mind.
Okay.
Okay,
Out of 163.
Okay,
okay,
And that was basing it off of using it's not that those books aren't typically in the middle school level libraries, because that's where they were recommended for. It's using our criteria that we set up with that Common Sense Media
Yeah.
right,
and or Barnes and Noble. So if it had
age rating.
an age rating that was above the middle school level, you just relocated. them.
Yeah.
Which is what we had done in
The
past
previous
practice.
situation, yeah.
so I asked that because I have a crazy idea, feel free to laugh. But what if we do like a red flag thing like in the NFL, right? You challenge it, and if it's found to be, if it's a middle school book and you challenge it,
Charge.
and you can charge, I mean, because then we missed it, right? Then we should have moved it. So if it's $50, but hey, it got moved to the high school, you're not gonna get charged
The-
$100.
I
But
like
is that
it, it might encourage more appeals.
But it doesn't address her concern about somebody not having enough money.
But yeah.
Yeah,
That was her, what I was hearing her opinion on, yes.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that it would deter somebody potentially from being able to afford to make a challenge.
sometimes $50 is the difference between eating a day, for a day.
I know it's hard too, because prior to, and I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, the reality is. My first decade here, we had a total of 2
Right,
books that were
right,
questioned or challenged.
And what happened with those two?
They were relocated to the high school.
Thank you.
That's it, up until this. So there's been a total of 2 challenges.
right,
Just this last one was enormous, so
right,
that's where. So I don't want to overthink it as well. I don't,
right.
we might not have another challenge for a decade, but I don't.
23 is the exact.
Okay.
That's still, the three is still the flow of three and then the informal.
Could we put a restriction on the challenges without doing a fee, but kind of along the parameters that you were suggesting, where it can only be a certain number by one individual
We could do
every,
that. We could also require that there has to be 100 signatures per each book. Or
that's
something
another,
along
yeah,
those lines,
yeah,
where there's no fee associated with it, but you have to find the other like-minded individuals to sign off that they support your request for review. Or I just picked an arbitrary
Yeah,
number.
yeah,
You can
right,
pick
right.
whatever number you want,
that's,
but because I'm thinking, well, if we have 100 people that feel that way, then it warrants review. That's kind of why I picked that.
sure, yeah.
But that could also be, and then eliminate the fee altogether. I mean, it is part of, because one could argue the flip side, it is taking time and resources away from the district, but one can also argue, yeah, but that's part of your job, is to
That's
do
true.
that and.
That's a good point.
Yep.
That's a real good point.
Yeah,
You
So
know,
how do we protect that time and effort?
right,
And avoid frivolous
right,
claims
Right.
or requests? And that may be an avenue.
I actually really like the signature idea,
yeah.
because you put it, you put in skin in the game, you're putting your name behind something.
Yep.
You know, that's a frustration of mine is people complain, but they don't put their name behind or speak. Here, you put your name on a document. I don't like this and I live in the district.
And I think I would kind of recommend that it be like a signed affidavit verifying that whatever we put on our form, that I've done a searching review of this book, I read it and based on the merit. You know what I mean, where it's not just,
Right,
oh yeah, I'll sign your petition, I'll sign your, but what you
Right.
really have a
because the
qualm over.
objections to a book can be found online anywhere, and all of those items are just copied and pasted.
Right.
So there's been no investment on the time of the person individually, or submitting the challenge, that they haven't they haven't read the
Potentially,
book,
yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
Can guarantee you all those books were not read. So,
Yeah, there's some really thick.
yeah, so,
So you kind of like that conceptually though, where we could go and get some language and bring that back, kind of along of our form requests. What do you like from a number in regards to like,
signatures?
yeah, signatures or people that sign?
Originally, we were tossing this around, we actually said 300.
I know, but you're
I don't
asking
know.
that the individuals that are signing up for this, they've looked at the book.
Right.
If we put that in.
Yeah, I think that has to be,
So
that they've
they're actually
physically-
filling out the application,
Yeah.
signing off on the application. I think 10 people, we've got 10 people that are signing up to have a book review. I think that one warrants a review. I think 10 isn't like a deterrent, you know,
Right.
right,
that should, if something's, they really want something reviewed, I think you can get 10 people, or maybe it's 20,
yeah, I was thinking like 25, but.
And you're filling out a form that you've read it, you're not just signing up to.
Right,
I'm okay with the lower number if we have that higher
Yeah.
standard that you're
Yeah.
saying
I like that.
off that I've
Yep.
individually looked at this and reviewed, and here's my rationale on that.
Skin of the game, I guess. No, I didn't just see it on a website.
right,
I don't like it. Here's the form.
that'd be part of the actual submitted package is.
Yeah.
Whatever it's kind of what you would have agreed to on number 11.
Are we allowed to address Ellen or no? I don't know how this works.
We shouldn't be
no,
on a
not
policy meeting.
public comment.
After the meeting, you could,
Yeah.
Okay.
we could have whatever discussion.
I just don't want you to have your arm up the whole.
Sorry, Alan.
Oh, no, just a clarifying question, we'll do it later.
Yeah.
That's part of my work out there, Adam.
Gotcha.
All right, so why don't we put together some language around that where it puts, there's a little bit more of the onus on that end.
Yeah,
And because that kind of fits within a lot of the feedback that we heard or criticism that, why can someone, restrict or challenge them? that they
Yeah,
have
now
to
it's
be
not
able
just one person.
Yeah.
yeah,
10 or 20, whatever we agree.
Uh-huh.
yeah.
And they've all looked at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
So speaking of the forms, did you guys like those forms that were linked?
Yeah, the one that was linked on the last one.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you kind of came up with? So.
Yeah, we just took it
Is
from the
it,
best.
where's the link and I can
Yeah.
pull it in here?
Page 8. There's actually 2. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
I totally missed that
I
link.
just did this too.
Either.
I just did the first one.
Yeah, I didn't see the second one.
Was there a,
There was a second one in a comment, and so I just put it into that additional example. Yeah.
I'm not sure that I want to even allow organizations to make a book challenge. I feel like it needs to be an individual.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just a carryover from where she
Pull it from.
pulled it from. It's-
Oh,
Yeah, we can strike whatever.
Yeah.
okay.
That won't even be on there.
Mhm.
But, whatever form,
So remove the organization.
Yeah.
Do we want to require that they examine the entire resource?
Yes.
I think we could modify that to be also include, I verify that I have reviewed the entire resource.
Because otherwise things are just taken out of context.
It is, and it is hard to understand the full, the author's intent or why was a work selected. If you're just reading a synopsis of like A Child Called It and just pulling out the awful things related to that abuse. That one came to mind because we received several email communications from people who talked about the importance of that book in their life. Being survivors of trauma and so forth, and how when they read that book, it meant a lot to them. But I get if you just pull out the excerpts from that book,
Absolutely.
it's terrible in of it, outside of the context. Okay. Good, so we can modify that and then put in language related to it. We don't have to determine or finalize the time frame. I think when there's that higher level, the obligation on the end user's part of submitting, then I'm certainly much more comfortable with a lower threshold of how many need to go through that process.
So what do you think, people, 10, 20? Was it 10?
25 came to mind, but I mean, 20. I think 10's not enough.
I would look at it working backwards from, people in the community, then people in the school, parents in school. I mean, I would work backwards, and I don't have anything in my mind that makes sense. But where are we coming up with 10, 20,
Yeah, I don't
25?
know.
You know, If I were to just throw a number, I would say 20. But
I want to make it, want to say somewhat reasonable,
Yeah.
and not like an undoable effort, I think if you can do 10, you can do 20.
Can I offer something real quick? I don't want to interrupt you guys' meeting, but if I can offer something. So, I mean, right now within our school districts, we can get on the school ballot with nothing except for just us saying so. But more importantly, other people out in the district can run for board or for any type of office, only having 25 signatures. Now, arguably, those things are far more difficult to do than this. I mean, if we have the higher standard that Jason is talking about, and you bring it down to 10 individuals that agree with you, it means that it's not so burdensome on the individual where they're unable to, like, if they got work, if they're working 2 jobs, they're not having to go try to collect all these signatures from all these individuals. They can have those 10 individuals that have read through everything and they are agreeing with the rest of it. Having 10 people, I think, is a pretty good amount of people for something like this.
I think all 10 are happy to complete the forms and verify they went through the aspect.
Well, if we're requiring the people who are signed off on it to have also reviewed the material, then yes, I would lower that standard to 10.
Yeah.
Thanks, Devin.
So,
And my concern would be how many, what does that pool narrow down to? It's not, how many parents are gonna be, or how many kids are there in the middle school that whose parents might have an issue with a book, and that pool gets narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. I think 20 was a good number, but the more I think about it, the lower that number I think should be, because there's not gonna be as many, there's just not gonna be that many eyes on it. So that was,
Okay,
the town would be third.
I think what's gonna be important are the questions that we're asking. So when you redraft that, I mean, now that we're having their involvement, let's be a little bit more, let's ask a couple questions more about the review and why this is meaningful to them. Because if we get 10 submittals and they're all the same thing, I'm not gonna be happy.
I agree.
Okay, so,
I agree.
Right.
so,
Thoughtful, respectful,
if
and
they're-
their digital response.
yeah, if it's just,
Right. They just copy and paste it.
yeah, I mean, we're,
not written by ChatGPT.
whatever, the point of it is, we want to address legitimate concerns.
Right.
We don't. So it's, don't waste our time. you
Yeah.
know? So,
Question 16 on there, what action are you requesting the school board to consider?
We should probably put it to the first level.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
gonna say, it doesn't go to the school board
Yeah,
right
no.
away, so,
Right, it goes to the principal.
yeah.
Right. Anything else we'd want on that sort of forum to? I think a question, why is it not acceptable for you to restrict access of your own child? Why do you, something along the lines, why do you feel access needs to be restricted
For all
from all students,
students.
not just your own
Yeah,
student?
yeah. That goes,
Fair question.
yeah.
I think that was the other biggest, probably the single biggest gripe was parents respected the right of, hey, by all means, as a parent, restrict access to your child,
Right,
but don't come into my sphere and restrict access from my child.
right. Yeah, I saw that as the.
I think question 6, where you're saying you represent. I would reference, we're gonna have these 10 come in, they're representing the same thing. I would change that question to the review, it's matching up with these other reviews of the same thing that you're asking us for, whether that's that book or whatever. You follow me?
Yeah, should we just strike it altogether?
Yeah. it doesn't-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. We might want some language in the policy related to that we do not accept requests from
Organization.
organizations.
They must be-
That request must be made by an individual citizen of the school district or an individual parent
Yep,
/ guardian of a student.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Did you like the format of that? That will spill into a spreadsheet for us, so something like that would be automatically collecting the titles and the authors and all those things. That was a lot of work, just with the
Yeah.
form that we had before,
right.
yeah. Just collecting all of that stuff from the
Yes.
other requests.
So is this like a Google form?
It's like that, but it's
Okay.
fancier,
Okay.
so that anybody can, yeah. Uh-huh.
Is this a free will form or?
It's not that either,
Oh,
because we thought the Freebo would have a problem. for
I'm
people
curious
to be
what
able
this
to.
new technology. is.
Well, I'm gonna have to ask Linda, because
Oh, okay.
Linda created this, yeah, so. But yeah, I really like how it turned out.
So it won't require somebody to have a Gmail address in
Correct.
order to
Correct.
fill it out.
Yeah, but then would spill it into a spreadsheet for us, so that if there were multiple titles that were being reconsidered, it would put it all in a nice location.
And
for
then
us.
we would know when it gets to the 10 for us to review.
Correct.
All right. And with it not being pulled from circulation for the review, it wouldn't even create a disruption.
So this would automatically, 10 people submit the same book, da, 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 da. That'll trigger.
So that's,
It'll go automatically to the principal first. We
so
can, like,
that's the threshold
to-
at which then it would trigger. a
If we go through that, we're using that concept, yeah.
Okay.
So technology question. And I just ran into this. Earlier today. If they don't put, like, if there's a typo or something. So. Like in the title, like if grapes of wrath, if O isn't capitalized or is, or how do we,
Oh, for us to be able to see it.
yeah, that it would be 10 or I guess.
Oh,
Yeah,
I guess we would
that
consider
money
it the
that-
same one. I
okay.
think, Yeah,
Well,
there'll be
we'll
this author will be associated with
Okay.
this.
You can set this to give a notification, so like if Linda's managing the spreadsheet, when someone submits fills out this form, submits it, we can program it to give us a notification that someone.
You get like an email.
Then you
that
get
says-
human eyes over it that.
Yeah.
Can resort it and look at it. Again, I'm not anticipating like, hey, we've got the form now, suddenly having a whole bunch of. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's suddenly gonna become the info thing, maybe. But. All right. Anything else? I think this is. Good start for us to go back and in review, we're gonna stay with kind of our boilerplate language that we have, incorporate those components that we reviewed. Leaving just the same appeals process, the primary piece was striking the language that pulls the books from circulation, which caused the big disruption in the first place. Putting in that survey review, that criteria will help curtail the any single individual from occupying an enormous amount of time of the principals unless there's that kind of critical mass of interest. And also it puts more onus on the person submitting that they've done an earnest due diligence in reviewing the book and the material and putting the rationale there. We'll update the form, bring that back at the next policy committee and the draft based off of that second or based off of our current policy for us to review. Does that sound accurate?
What did we decide on that informal complaint process? If we're
Oh,
gonna add that?
Did we want to add that or leave it as more of the formal with the form?
I think I don't know that I want to do the informal.
I think you're either in or not, so.
Yeah,
I like that.
something that I kind of liked on option 3 was some of the additional language on the selection criteria. I think it gives more standards to what is put into the library. Does that make sense? Because our language right now is it seems to be a little light on that.
Under B.
It explains that language better. I think.
Yes,
It's more explicit.
right.
It's a lot of the same things.
It's a lot of the same thing,
Yeah,
but I
it
think
just
it
kind of
just gives
spells
it
it out.
more,
Yep.
The selection criteria section.
yeah. So,
The blue is in our current.
correct, the
language,
glue is.
But
is
you
our
like
current
the other
language.
pieces.
But yeah, I think it, like
Okay.
Sarah said, it gives a little bit more definition.
So do you want to add all those sections, B, C, and it gives, there's,
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the,
because they cover the gifts, they cover.
yeah, you're right,
Maintenance and weeding
I like 3. I like the whole.
thing, yeah.
I like the whole-
yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I actually thought the reading was pretty good.
so if you guys like the rest of what that says,
So I incorporate that first portion of,
under number
Great.
1 for selection of library materials.
because I think you guys like our current process better than 3's for the reconsideration, but you like the selection of 3 books listed there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
We can make that switch.
yeah, we can have that. Great. Well, then we'll get to work on that for the next meeting. We'll do those revisions and come back with just here's.
Yeah, here's
The
what we're looking
proposal
at.
and the form that gives
Yeah.
time to ruminate on it too.
Yeah.
And you will likely may receive feedback from people that were at the meeting and so forth and thoughts, so. It's still a draft form at that
Yep.
point, obviously.
Yep,
All right,
yeah, because it's possible we haven't considered everything that we need to, but I think it's a really good start.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
It's a lot of work, so.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I have to get to a meeting at the middle school, so I'm gonna excuse myself.
all right. Next, I just put it on there as discussion of the ACT, SAT scores to universities and colleges. I know Julia and myself, we received a concern from a parent related to this. I can give some background on this. It has been, within Skyward, there's a default switch as it relates to transcripts. And what the high schools have selected on the default switch is when an individual requests a transcript that it gives their whole file. That includes their, all their coursework that they took. And it also included all their ACT score report, which would share their super scores. Since COVID, a lot of universities have moved away from requiring that ACT submission and or SAT submission. What the schools have communicated out, if you don't want that score included, you need to let us know ahead of time and they'll send it without the score. What I directed the parent concern was that that was the default, that it automatically sent the scores out. And it was as simple, I had Lena go in and she unchecked it from Skyward. So now if a student wants the scores sent out, they have to request the scores to be sent out. The default is that only the transcript will get sent. That way they're not unintentionally sent. So that has been corrected and fixed in the system. The reason it was on here was, I think, was discussion, do we need to have a policy or not related to it? I'm fine either way. It has been set up and corrected within Skyward at all three of the schools. And when I say corrected, it's just been set up to where it won't automatically send out the scores. So, yeah. So questions, discussion, or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked to find out that, I mean, I didn't even know that, that could be sent out without the student knowing. To me, that's, yeah, it's, I guess, I'm glad that it's no longer the default setting, because I feel strongly that it should be the students, or the parents' decision as to whether or not their ACT or SAT scores are sent out. So I'm glad that default has been changed.
And I don't know in that instance whether it was sent without them knowing or if they just forgot that, hey, you need to let them know not to send it. So I do think it's better to have it flipped though, that you have to let them know to send it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it also spurred another question in my mind. Wondering, I mean, we're one of very few schools that I'm aware of that pays for all of our students to take the ACT.
No, the ACT, all juniors, it's the state exam, so all juniors take the ACT. By state law, it's required now, unless they opt out.
Really?
Yeah, so that switched, so it's been several years now.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it's all, you're right, so all students in the state of Wisconsin, unless they do the alternative assessment, or their
Okay,
parents opt them out, take it their junior year.
okay.
And that's part of our state report card
Got it.
piece, yeah.
Okay.
I think you might be thinking of the AP exams, because we have set up a structure that we will do a fee waiver for students. We don't want finances to stay in their way
Right.
on the AP exams if they want to take.
Yeah, and I recently, listened to a podcast of kind of about that whole requirement, or, that universities are no longer requiring it, it's about 80%. But they also said that a lot of universities are starting to require it again. Like, it's coming back around because they're realizing that it's a better predictor of success. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think UW-Madison is set to restart utilizing the ACT either next year, but you're correct, that's accurate. So thoughts, that's the current status. If we want to develop a policy, let me know, we can put something together. But from administrative directive, it's currently set that they have to request for this.
It's just a simple setting change.
Yeah, I don't think it.
Yeah, it's, as long as that's what it's currently set to, I don't think we need a policy.
Yeah. And in the instance where it was sent and the student didn't want it to go, the counselor was directed to contact the institutions and let them know that they were sent a transcript that had a mistake on it, that they were to resubmit the updated one that didn't have the scores. All right, then we do have a closed session just to go over the request and the exit survey for the seniors that are graduating out. And so I think we can adjourn to close and then, yeah. We've seen a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn to close.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to move to a closed session. The policy committee will not reconvene in open session.
I guess we do a roll call.
Okay.
Still close. Ed Scarrow,
You.
Adam Andre,
Yes.
and Julia Ingersoll.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for those that joined on.